is Histories and Mysteries. I'm Ashley.
I'm Jessica.
And I'm Rochelle.
And on this week's episode, Ashley's going to be talking about the Schmidt family.
Yep.
Okay, perfect.
Murder.
I know you just told me that like 2 seconds ago, but
Yeah, and like Rochelle said, it's actually the Schmidt family murder.
I didn't want to say that if it wasn't true.
How
It
is
is
it not true?
Because I forgot what it was. Plain and simple.
Okay.
And I'm going to be talking about Hans Schmidt.
Ooh, never heard of him.
You don't want to.
Okay, so I'm gonna get right into mine. I got this from an episode called Killer Cases.
Ooh.
And it's a wild ride. There's a talk of the occult and witches and Wiccan, or Wicca. So Escambia County, Florida, they called it the Redneck Riviera, has been home to some of the more infamous crimes in the nation, such as the Black Widow killer, and is also where Ted Bundy was finally caught. This case is no different, perhaps a bit weirder, but not different. This case was named the Blue Moon Witchcraft Murders, and it centers around one family, the Smith family.
That sounds so cool.
It really turns out to not be cool, but it starts off cool.
Okay.
It's not great.
Vonville, it was her name, aka Bonnie, and her 2 adult sons who lived with her were murdered in 2015. Apparently her 2 adult sons lived with her because Bonnie had a lot of health issues. One of her sons was mentally handicapped, so the second son lived there to take care of both of them.
Aww.
And apparently after Bonnie's husband died and her health kind of declined, she kind of became a recluse. She didn't leave the house. She would order 5 or 6 packages a day from QVC, which same girl, same. But she was ordering so much and she didn't use a lot of it. So it kind of came like, they showed pictures. It was kind of like a hoarder house. There was just so much in there.
What is QVC?
QVC is like a national shopping channel that you can watch and order things off of it.
Pretty sure it's like a late night shopping.
Yeah. It's generally
Cool.
like people or like older ladies watch it and buy things, but
Okay.
so like I said, both of her adult sons lived with her, but they also kind of kept to themselves. They were just kind of like a more introverted family. And the oldest, Richard, who kind of lived there to take care of both of them, worked at the Pensacola Naval Air Station for a, quote, secret Homeland Security division. He worked in the crypto department. And at first I was like, crypto, like cryptocurrency? No, just like where you learn a bunch of like Navy codes and stuff like that.
Weird.
And he didn't show up to work. And so they were kind of like, oh, what's going on? So for a couple of days, they didn't think anything of it. And then by like the 3rd day, they're like, okay, well, we should probably like tell someone. So they called police. And when police arrived on scene, they found piles of blankets and clothes, just like piles and piles. And as they started to sift through them, they found a male leg peeking out from underneath. These were attached to bodies. I didn't know how...
Good to know.
I didn't know how to write this without making it sound like it was like dismembered parts. It is not dismembered parts. There's bodies, but they just like, at first they just saw like the male leg peeking out. And then they found like a female hand peeking out. And they found that this was Richard and his mother, both deceased.
Oh.
John was found sitting on the couch. It looked as if someone had walked up to him, hit him over the head with a hammer, and then slit his throat. Police said there were no defensive marks, which led them to believe that either he was sleeping and didn't see them approaching, or he knew his attacker. Bonnie was found the same way, hit in the head with a hammer, and her throat slit. But Richard also had a shot to his, like it went through his ear, but he also had a wound in his head and his throat cut. They also noticed that Richard's keys were missing, and they found unidentified DNA on his front pocket. So the first thing police thought was maybe this has something to do with his job because he did work for that like secret Homeland Security. But then they kind of looked into what he was doing, and nothing that he was working on would really lend to like terrorist action or anything like that. Police did believe that since there was no forced entry, that the family knew whoever killed them. And one of the people that they had called in to talk to at first, just to kind of like get to know the family, was Bonnie's other son, Donald.
Oh.
Now, Donald was stepbrothers with John, or no, he was half brothers with John and Richard. So he wasn't like full brothers with them. So it must have been from a different marriage or partner or whatever. But while interviewing him, I thought this detective was like really kind of shitty. So according to Donald, he did not yet know that his family was killed. He just knew that they were dead. And so the detective said something about them being killed. And Donald said, killed? They said they were deceased, but never told me they were killed. And the detective goes,
why would they just randomly all die?
Yeah, that's true. But then the detective goes, they're dead. And it looks like they were killed. Like, okay, way to be empathetic there.
Great. That's so nice.
Yeah. And Donald repeated, killed. The detective, mm-hmm. And how were they killed? The detective said, it looks like they were shot. And Donald said, shot? The detective said, mm-hmm. So it's just like everything the detective said he was repeating. And they said that he was being really nonchalant and wasn't emotional. And so they thought that was suspicious. To me, it just kind of looked like he was in shock because he was just kind of like repeating everything they were telling him. Like it just,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? But apparently every Tuesday night he would go to the house. And I guess Richard would work late that night. So Donald would go to the house and cook dinner for John and his mother. And so they asked him when he had visited this past Tuesday night if, you know, something happened and, you know, maybe he killed them. And he said no. And they pressured him and he continued to say no. And they're like, well, can we search your home? And they said, sure. When they searched his home, they discovered that he was actually a practicing Wiccan.
Ooh.
Which is, it doesn't fit with this. I don't think he was Wiccan. I think he was dabbling in something darker because Wiccan is very like nature and and like peaceful.
Yeah.
And you could tell that the detectives didn't know anything about Wicca. So one of the things they said that when they investigated his home, they found he had an altar set up with a dagger and a pentagram on the floor.
Oh.
And that apparently his Wiccan beliefs were like the cause of him murdering his family. Apparently there was some like blue moon sacrificial ritual in the Wiccan religion, which is not, it's not true. That's not a thing.
Yeah. When did this take place? Sorry.
2015.
Oh, so the internet was around. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Which they used incorrectly. And I'll talk about that.
Okay.
But apparently his Wiccan beliefs did cause strife in the family because his mom was very Christian and very against it. But Donald insisted that he and his mother were very close. When the police spoke with neighbors, though, they found out that this wasn't necessarily true. They weren't as close as Donald had said they were. But I mean, he did go over every Tuesday to cook for the family. So, I mean, they had to be semi-close. But apparently all of this was enough for police to bring him back in for questioning at 1:30 in the morning.
That's dumb. Let the man sleep.
I know, right? And again, they tried to say like, oh, you know, there's this Wiccan ritual, this like, you know, sacrifice on a blue moon. And Donald denied knowing anything about a Wiccan sacrifice. But he did admit that he was a practicing Wiccan, which the reason why he didn't know anything about it is because it's not a thing. So, but the sheriff had already gone on the news and said, quote, it's witchcraft, I'll tell you that. He was getting his information from one of his deputies who quickly read through a now debunked website about Wiccan like practices.
Super. Love that.
Interestingly, the day the sheriff made this announcement, he also had his first fundraiser for his reelection campaign that same day. So the Blue Moon theory made the news and got him really popular and helped with his campaign a lot. But after a long night of questioning, police had nothing on Donald and they had to let him go. When he attended the funeral, his family said he didn't cry or shed any tears. They also said that after a while after the family went to visit Donald, and I guess Donald was talking about the case and the police questioning him, and he's like, well, if they're so smart, why didn't they find this? And he reached on the top of the fridge and pulled down a machete and slammed it on the table. So
Good, great for your case there,
Oh,
but
no.
the family was shocked, but police didn't have anything on him, so they went back to the house to try and find more evidence. It was harder in this case because Donald did frequent the house every Tuesday, so his DNA was everywhere. But apparently it did turn up on places where they said it shouldn't have been. And this sounds stupid, but hold on.
Okay.
So they said that it was on the zipper of his brother Richard's notebook case and on his brother Richard's checkbook, which they said was a big deal. Because at first I was like, that's not a big deal. What if he just like grabbed his brother's checkbook for him? But apparently in the interrogation, before they had even found this evidence, the detective, just for the hell of it, was like, do you touch Richard's stuff? And Donald was like, no, I don't touch any of Richard's stuff in that house. Absolutely not. I do not mess with anything of Richard's. So he was kind of caught in a lie there, which is a little weird.
Yeah.
They also found Donald's DNA on the inside of Richard's belt.
Oh.
Which is weird because he said that he actually hadn't seen Richard in 2 to 3 weeks. Because remember, Richard works late. That's why Donald goes over to the house. This is the one that clinches it for me. Because at first all this, I was like, Donald's not guilty. But here's the one that's kind of like, oh, I think maybe he might be.
Yeah.
They found cigarette butts in the trash can with Donald's DNA on it on top of bloody towels. So someone had put bloody towels in the trash can from the scene, and then his cigarettes went on top of that. So he was there after the crime was committed.
So if it wasn't him, like he would have seen it and probably been like, what the fuck's going on with all this blood?
Yeah.
But the fact that didn't happen.
So 3 months into the investigation, police finally had enough with this DNA to arrest Donald just a few days before Halloween, by the way. Creepy.
Oh.
For some reason, and they didn't explain why, and I tried to kind of look it up, but I couldn't really see. It took another 4 years to go to trial. During trial, prosecutors decided not to mention the witchcraft or blue moon theory because it was ridiculous. But they needed to come up with a motive for why Donald would have killed his whole family. So they found one, and it's a good one.
Ooh.
They said that in Bonnie's last will and testament, Donald was excluded. And the only way he could get anything is if all 3 of them, Bonnie and her other 2 sons, died. And her estate was worth about $1 million.
Jeez.
But in this 4 years of waiting for trial, Donald's attorney had been doing his homework and argued that, one, there's no physical evidence that indicated he murdered his family. Like, there was no gun found, no blood found at Donald's house. And if you like slit someone's throat, like, you're going to have blood on you.
Yeah.
And as far as the will goes, it excluded Donald Jr., but the Donald on trial was Donald Sr. So he said, was that just an error, or was she meant to exclude his son? But they did show like a clip of the will, and further down it did say that her estate would be split equally between her 2 sons.
Oh.
So I don't know.
Weird.
Another nail in the coffin is that prosecutors got a letter from a jailhouse informant that they called to the stand, who was in jail with Donald while he awaited trial. The informant said that Donald told him he did kill his mom and brothers because he wanted the money because he was left out of the will. He said that he had been thinking about it for the past 3 or 4 years, and what finally pushed him over the edge, Jessica, was consulting with a Ouija board.
Sorry, it was a horrible laugh. But like, yeah.
And
I haven't touched my Ouija board since like our first episode. Thank you. Or the Zozo episode when I had that nightmare afterwards.
That was terrible.
It was awful.
See, every time I go to work, there's just like a stack of them on the desk. Like,
and that they did find a Ouija board at Donald's house. The informant also said that the other prisoners were scared of Donald because they thought he was a witch. The informant also said that Donald had told him that he tortured his mom by cutting her left pinky finger to get the combination to the safes in the room. And investigators had found the safe in her house open, and they did know that her pinky finger had been cut, but they didn't know why until the informant came out, and they hadn't released that information.
Wow, that's creepy.
The defense argued that the informant was just a con man. They also argued that the investigation was done poorly and that the forensics collection. Okay, this is bad too for the prosecution's case. So the forensics collection was done by a woman who had since been fired for stealing drugs from the evidence room.
Wow.
And the medical examiner on the case had resigned because she was accused of stealing money from the state. So not great people here. The other argument was the time of death. So the bodies were discovered on July 31st, 2015. But investigators said that the actual murder had taken place 3 days earlier on the 28th. That day, Donald was seen on camera wearing the same outfit that his body was found in. So that was Tuesday. But defense called up a forensic scientist that said the victims couldn't have been killed on Tuesday based on their body heat and rigor mortis. The doctor said that they couldn't have been killed any earlier than Wednesday, which would not put Donald on the scene Tuesday, like prosecution had said.
Interesting.
And that was the court case. That's what the jury had to go on. So what do you guys think? Guilty or not? And then I'll tell you what he was found.
well, I spoiled it for myself, so I want to answer.
Oh, okay. Don't say that, Rochelle. But Jessica, what do you think?
I'm back and forth about it. I mean, I want to say yes, just because of some of the evidence, but at the same time, like the investigation was done very poorly and there were some pretty shady people on it. So all I could think about was the Johnny Depp and Amber Heard trial. So I don't know. I feel like it might I don't know. It could honestly go either way.
Did you see the like witness that was up today from like TMZ, and Heard's lawyer was like, was this your like 15 minutes of fame or whatever? And he's like, I could say the same thing about you taking Amber Heard as a client. Was this your 15 minutes of fame?
Oh, that's hilarious.
You could just see your face like,
it's brutal. But like even her psychiatrist, did you see him? Because he looked like he was a patient himself, not a psychiatrist.
Somebody compared him to Perry the Platypus.
Aww.
Dr.
Doofenshmirtz, because not Perry the Platypus.
Yeah, that one. Yeah, sorry. I don't watch the show. I just thought that
Phineas and Ferb was great.
I think he probably did it, but I don't think that prosecution proved it.
No.
I think there's too much reasonable doubt. But the jury deliberated for 4 hours and found Donald guilty.
Oh.
During his sentencing, Donald stood up to address the court and asked for a mistrial. He went on an hour rant about how his lawyers were incompetent and rude. And when he asked them a question, they called him a stupid asshole. The judge was like, no. He was up for the death penalty, but the jury sentenced him to life in prison instead.
Oof.
So Donald is currently in prison, serving his sentence for the murder of his mom and 2
So
brothers.
did they figure out exactly what happened?
No, this is the most they have.
It's brutal.
Yeah.
Mm.
So, I think the whole Wiccan thing was just a
A scapegoat.
I think that was
yeah. Kind of trying to bring back the satanic panic.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. So that is my story.
Good story.
Thanks.
All right, so tell me all about this guy that I've never heard of before.
Okay, I will, and you're gonna immediately regret wanting to hear about him. Trigger warning, content warning, graphic content warning, whatever you want me to warn on here is going to be a warning.
It's just all bad, is what you're saying.
Yeah, he's a very bad man. So let's get into it. Long before the Boston Globe brought attention to a chronic pattern of child molestation in the Catholic Church, clergy misconduct went mostly unreported and unpunished, with the exception of Hans Schmidt. He was the first and only priest to be executed in the United States in the early 1900s.
Holy crap, to execute a priest that early, that's saying a lot.
Yeah. But I mean, also at the same time, like, why wasn't it done sooner?
Yeah, but I just think like back then they were so religious, you know, and your priest was like your like pillar of your community. So for them to like, wow, that says a lot about his crimes.
Oh yeah, he was not a good man. So his crimes were brutal, and his list of crimes was super vast. And his entire story was set out in front of the world by a press keen to illustrate that even trusted religious leaders can be monsters.
Ooh.
So on to his childhood. He was an out of the ordinary kid. He was born in the German town of Schaffenburg in 1881 to Heinrich and Gertrude. And as a boy, he had an unsettling habit of spending his afternoons watching cows and pigs being slaughtered at the local slaughterhouse.
Ew, why would you watch that?
Right? Like, why is that a pleasurable thing for you to see?
Ew, I don't even like seeing animals die on TV.
Oh, I cry hardcore for animals on TV.
I know.
So much. Gertrude, his mother, gave birth to 10 children while his father worked for the railroad. Gertrude was disinterested in caring for her 10 children, and she felt upset because Heinrich was away and she was responsible for the household alone. Instead of caring for her children, though, she went to church lessons and chanted the rosary.
Okay.
Yeah. You're complaining about having to take care of the household alone, and yet you're not even taking care of the children.
Yeah.
Interesting. Heinrich used to fight his wife's Catholicism and would frequently become enraged, making Hans fearful of him. Hans's grandfather had a mental breakdown and was an alcoholic, and other members of his family are also said to have committed suicide. So just a long list of healthy people. Yeah. Heinrich Schmidt was a well-liked man, of course, yet he had a frightening temper. He had his own set of beliefs and used to speak to his, he didn't used to speak to his children. He used to spank his children for disobeying him.
If only it was just speaking to his children.
Yeah. He used to thrash Hans cruelly if he ever found out about his unusual behavior. And he used to beat his wife so badly because she was a devout Catholic.
Oh.
Gertrude, though, I don't know how she thought this is going to help. She dressed Hans in priest attire and referred to him as the little priest.
That's weird.
Yeah. It's very creepy. Imagine a horror movie like that. the little priest.
Ugh.
It's just like this little dapper man dressed in like the outfit and just like going around with a Bible and a knife.
I hate everything about that. That'd be a great horror movie.
Want to make a movie with me? Oh my gosh. Oh, the humor to mask the scary. Hans became particularly fascinated by Roman Catholic ceremonies, and he pretended to be a priest with a makeshift altar. He was ordained as a priest in Germany at the age of 25 in 1904. He spent the next 4 years in Germany, but was forced to relocate due to disagreements with his superiors. It was just the beginning of his cycle of confrontation and displacement. He was assigned to St. John's Parish in Louisville, Kentucky in 1908. Schmidt clashed with Catholic leaders in Louisville, and he was forced to migrate to St. Boniface Church on Manhattan's east side. But he wasn't the only newcomer to St. Boniface at that time. There was Anna Aumüller, a young Austrian maid who had recently been employed to keep shop. After that, Schmidt and Aumüller began having an affair.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah.
You can't do that when you're a priest.
No. And can you explain why?
So for those of you that don't know, I grew up Catholic, so I know a little bit about this. I don't agree with it. I think it's stupid, but priests aren't allowed to get married because they are supposed to be married to God and be like more like, I don't want to say pure, but like more in God's word and study God and all of his like, you know, commandments and all that kind of stuff, and just really like submerge themselves in the Lord and everything, which I don't know. I think that priests or fathers that can get married have a little bit more life experience and can relate a little bit better, but that's just my opinion.
Yeah. Interesting. Thank you for letting me know, because I always thought it was very weird that they like couldn't get married.
Yeah, I think it's weird too.
Well, especially because the Bible says to like marry and multiply.
Yeah.
That's okay. Anyways.
But if you don't want kids, that's totally cool too. We're not saying that.
Yes. We just like with what we know about the Bible, I feel like we just think that it's contradictory.
Yeah, to have that.
Yeah.
Rule. Yeah.
So Schmidt was then transferred because they think people learned about the affair and they didn't want to have that information spread amongst the congregation.
Yeah.
But that didn't stop them from being together. So Schmidt married Aumüller in a secret ceremony on February 26th, 1913, which he performed himself.
Oh. I don't think that's allowed.
I don't either. But I mean, Catholic priests are also forbidden from marrying, much less having sexual relations. So I think that him marrying himself was the least of his concerns.
He married himself?
No, but like he like
married. Yeah, okay. I thought maybe I misheard you and like he married himself to himself, but I'm
no,
caught up. I got it.
And I know when I said it, I was like, oh man, that sounds weird. He married them. Anyways, I'm not gonna. However, at the end of 1913, when Anna was only 21 and Schmidt was 31, their love affair came to a very abrupt and gruesome end.
Oh, I was waiting for the bad stuff to start.
It started.
Oh.
Schmidt learned that Aumüller was pregnant, and he realized that his days as a priest would be numbered if news got out that a supposedly celibate Catholic priest had married and had a child.
So instead of doing the logical thing and just like maybe going to be like a preacher for like a non-Catholic church where you can get married, he decides to murder her, which makes total sense.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly what happened.
He's not a very good priest.
No. He actually slit her throat in an uptown Manhattan apartment that he had rented for her. And he did so with a 12-inch butcher's knife. And with a hacksaw, he sawed off her head and then sawed her body in half.
Oh my, he's a really bad priest.
Yeah. Honestly, though, like, just leave her. Don't murder her.
Yeah.
I don't understand people.
Ugh.
So it gets worse.
Oh, great.
He covered each portion of her body in an August 31st newspaper, placed her lower torso in one of her pillowcases that had a monogrammed A on it, and fastened a large chunk of gray schist to each body part. And schist is a rock.
Oh, okay.
It's a rock. It's just a rock. It's a type of rock. The fragments of Anna Almuller were then dropped in the Hudson River by Hans. He hoped that the schist he'd collected in Manhattan would sink the body to the bottom. But 3 days later, 2 children on the New Jersey side of the Hudson discovered a woman's upper torso. The lower portion of Almuller's body was discovered 3 miles downstream in Weehawken, New Jersey, still wrapped in the pillowcase with the schist knotted to it.
So that schist didn't work very well.
No. Despite the fact that the body was discovered in New Jersey, the evidence was officially turned over to the NYPD. The type of rock that was used was the most accessible to Schmidt and was very rare in New Jersey. So that's why it was kind of, because they're like, oh, well, it started over there, so they can have it.
Gotcha.
An autopsy of the body revealed that the victim was a woman under the age of 30, standing 5 feet 4 inches tall and weighing between 120 and 130 pounds. It was also determined that she had given birth prematurely just before she was killed. So that's sad.
Oh.
Yeah.
Where's the baby?
I don't know.
Oh.
Yeah.
Let's just think that he took the baby and gave it to like an orphanage or something. That's what I'm going with in my head.
The baby would have been like very young.
Oh.
Yeah.
Like too young to live outside the womb.
I think so.
So,
yeah.
Oh,
because I don't think that he would have had her live longer and to risk showing.
That's true. That's true. But then I wonder why she gave birth.
Well, I'm just wondering if like the stress of the situation, maybe. I don't know.
Maybe, yeah.
Or maybe she just had a miscarriage. Who knows, right?
And maybe that's just what they called it back then or whatever.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
So
hate that.
Yes. Aside from the body, though, the NYPD's greatest piece of evidence was the monogrammed pillowcase. The authorities were able to link it to a specific company since the monogram was unusual, and the company kept extensive business records.
Oh.
So the A led to Al Mueller's flat. The landlord of this apartment told police that a man by the name of Mr. Hans Schmidt rented the apartment out for a relative of his about 2 weeks prior. Which, why would you use your own name?
Yeah, he wasn't very smart about this.
No, he was stupid.
Which good, but yeah, idiot.
Yes. This landlord then proceeded to lead the police into the apartment, which was still splattered in blood. Despite a scouring brush and 6 bars of soap at the sink, blood streaks splashed the walls and the floors. Schmidt had had greater luck cleaning the butcher's knife and handsaw of blood and had stashed them in a trunk. Schmidt and his job at St. Joseph's were mentioned in letters sent to Al Mueller in another trunk. And handkerchiefs with the same embroidered A as the pillowcase were also found as well.
It was Fancy.
I know, but that also meant they were in the right place.
Yes.
Immediately, the lead detective and his partner went to St. Joseph's in order to locate Schmidt and question him on their findings. He confessed to everything within minutes.
What?
Yeah. And he said, I quote, I loved her. Sacrifices should be consummated in blood. Unquote.
Wow.
Isn't that
I don't think
gross?
you know what love is there, buddy.
No. On December 7th, 1913, Schmidt's trial began. Schmidt's defenders said that he was overcome with bloodlust and he was too mad to know right from wrong, despite the fact that his culpability was undeniable.
Yeah.
Schmidt and his lawyers adhered to the insanity plea for 23 days. This case, though, fulfilled all of the desires of the sensationalist New York newspapers at the time. The media put up their circus tent surrounding the courts, publicizing every delicious detail, and yellow journalism was in full gear. And if you don't know what yellow journalism is,
I was just gonna ask.
it usually refers to sensationalistic or biased stories that newspapers present as objective truth.
Gotcha.
Yes. It was established late 19th century by the journalists, and they coined that term to belittle the unconventional techniques of their rivals.
That's funny.
Yeah, really bitter.
Yeah.
Despite the evidence, it was a hung jury 10-2.
Oh, did they have to be unanimous back then?
Yeah, and this is really funny. The judge saw fit to inform the jury that the second trial would be best not to end like the first. And he said, quote, if you are satisfied that the defendant purchased the knife and saw with which he cut up the body, thinking of using them as he did, and if you are satisfied that in the middle of the night he went to the flat, took off his coat and cut her throat, and then cut up her body, what conclusion do you come to? Unquote.
What a sassy judge.
He also said, use your common sense. Your experience with men. Bear in mind, it isn't every form of mental unsoundness that excuses a crime.
You would never be able to say something like that now. That would be a mistrial for sure, but I like the sassy judge.
Right. I like him. Or her, I don't know. I'm assuming it was a girl, assuming back then.
Yeah. But, yeah, back then I'm assuming it was a guy.
Oh, so funny. That was like the best part. So it didn't end the same way the second time around, and he was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to death by electric chair by the jury.
Oh.
He was electrocuted to death in New York's notorious Sing Sing prison on February 18th, 1916, just over a year before the United States entered World War I against Germany.
Oh, wow.
As reporters looked for new angles to cover, relentless media attention drew details of Schmidt's troubled history out of the woodwork. Schmidt seemed to be trailed by a trail of previous unsolved crimes wherever he went.
He was trailed by a trail?
He was trailed by a trail. But public trust in church officials had saved him from suffering any serious penalties. For one thing, detectives discovered Schmidt's second flat. He had a printing press inside that churned out $10 bills, which were equivalent to $240 in today's money.
Oh my gosh.
Schmidt was working on a plot with a Manhattan dentist to conduct a succession of murders and make off with the life insurance claims, in addition to counterfeit money.
So he had it all planned out, man.
Oh, yeah. This one's sad. The body of a 9-year-old girl was discovered in the basement of St. John's Parish in Louisville, which was Schmidt's first job in the United States.
No.
Yeah. When Schmidt arrived in Louisville, the girl had gone missing, but a local janitor had been charged with the crime.
Oh.
Yeah. Her body was discovered mutilated in a manner that was hauntingly identical to that of Al Mueller. Even further back in Schmidt's history, German investigators linked him to the murder of a young girl in his birthplace of Aschaffenburg. Schmidt was never questioned by the Germans before his execution in the United States, and the matter fell cold.
Well, then it makes sense, I think, kind of why he was so sloppy, because he had gotten away with it so many times that he was just like, whatever.
Oh yeah, I'm not gonna get touched. Like,
yeah, I'm invincible.
Yeah. Hans Schmidt is the only Catholic priest in the United States to ever suffer the death penalty, and it's debatable whether this implies he's a single blemish on the church's history or that the country places too much faith in church leaders.
Ooh.
And that's my story on Hans Schmidt.
Ew, I hated him.
Me too. I used historyofyesterday.com as well for my source.
Oh.
Yeah. But yeah, so he's a horrible man. Horrible. Yeah. Do not like him at all.
No, especially like, I mean, murdering one person isn't, bad enough, but then all these others that are linked to him.
Yeah. Oh, I know, it's awful. I have to move on from that. I have a joke. I just need to find it.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure I saved it. I better have saved it because it was really funny. Well, I thought it was really funny. Okay, I found it. Just give me a second. Okay. Do you know the difference between wallpaper and toilet paper?
I just heard this one and I was like, this is so good. Then you say, no, what?
Gross.
Oh, I like that one. I saw that one too. I was like, I have to remember that for the podcast, and then I totally forgot, but you keep me clutch.
I immediately saved it. I'm like, oh. I have to share this. Yes.
Well, if you want more of us lovely ladies, you can find us on Facebook and Instagram.
And if you'd like to rate and review us, you can do so on Spotify now and also Apple Podcasts. And we would really appreciate it because it helps us get out there.
Yeah, definitely. And we look forward to bringing you 2 new stories next week.
Bye.
Bye.